So this is the Creative Memories circle cutter. Now, I haven't played with this extensively yet, but when I have played, I have really enjoyed it. What you need to know is there are measurements. So if I hold this up, there are white measurements here and there are black measurements. And the white measurements are for cutting, and that will cut on this end, the end with the little knob with the little white thing that you press. I'm sure there's a proper name for it. And the black is for drawing. And you would put in your Creative Memories dual tip pen, you put in the fine tip end into this, and then you can kind of draw, there we go, like a spiral graph. So it will draw circles onto your page. I haven't played with that too much. I know there is an art to it, and you should practice on scrap paper or the fly sheets first before you do it on your scrapbook page. So that's the markings. The other thing you need to know about the markings is they're done in, I don't even know, it's metric, so I don't know the proper terminology, but 7.2, 7.4, 6, 8, 10. So they're done in, I guess that would be tenths. I'm not sure. But it's not your 7 1/4, 7 1/2, 7 3/4, and 8. It's 7.2, 7.4, 0.6, 0.8, and then you get into the 8. So that's just something to remember there. So if you want a 7 1/4 inch, it's kind of between the 2 and the 3, or the second two marks would be 7 1/4. So 7 1/2 would be, between the 4 and the 6 mark. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. The other thing you need to know is if you turn it upside down, there is this part here I call the anchor, and this is like a no grip section. So this grips to your page. When you push this button down, I don't know, you won't be able to see it, but when you press this down, this engages onto your paper and it holds the whole mechanism into place. So that's something you want to remember, that this holds it into place. This dial here, so this white piece is the dial. You spin it so that you can move it along, and then you tighten it. Once it's tight, you can't move it. So this is your dial. This loosens it and tightens it. So it's your dial. The other part of this mechanism, there are measurements on this side that are centimeters. Yay, centimeters. I wonder if that's something coming soon. Wouldn't that be nice? And this is just for cutting. So always remember that white is for cutting, black is for drawing. So if you want to cut, an 18 centimeter circle, then you would put it here. So white always for cutting, black for drawing. The other piece of this mechanism is the blade. And so the blade is actually here underneath. But this little dial here engages the blade. So, you kind of have to press, but not too hard. What engages the blade is this button. So you can spin this, like if I push this down, I can spin this all the way around my page and I'm not cutting a darn thing until I press this button. Once I press this button in, I start cutting. So where does it cut? Well, the blade is a little bit in from the outside of the housing unit. So sometimes it's hard to see where it's going to cut. So what I do is, to help me figure that out, is I've kind of lined up the center of where the blade is, and you can kind of press your little button here, press your button in, and you'll be able to see that. Press it in and press it down, and you'll be able to see the blade. It's a rotary blade. But basically the center of this is where it's going to cut down. So what I did is I kind of measured where the center was, and just use a piece of paper for this. And I marked, the end of my cutter. So if you can see the end of the circle cutter, and I honestly think they could have come up with something fancier than circle cutter. But that's just, so I marked it right here with a Sharpie. And so, so that's where it's going to cut. They have it marked kind of on the other end for the drawing tool, but they didn't mark this end. So I marked it with a Sharpie. The other thing I did is I marked on this side where the blade is actually cutting. Because if I had this on my paper like this, like that to cut, then I'm off where I want to cut. So what I did is I took any old piece of paper, doesn't matter what you take, and I lined it up with that cut line, like where it's cutting in that blade, and I wrapped it around and I made a mark here. So, and I did that on both sides, so I have it there and there. So I know that my blade is cutting here, like right kind of in between there. So now when I put this on my page, I can look and see, okay, the marks here, it's gonna cut an inch in. And the marks here, I'm on the page. So I always know I'm on the page by keeping those marks. So that's kind of the basis of the whole mechanism. Now, how to cut? How are you going to cut this? And this is the brand new Lullaby collection, by the way. That does not look like baby. It's so pretty. So your markings are, this will give you a 3-inch circle. So that's the smallest circle you can make, is a 3-inch circle. You can't make anything smaller, so just keep that in mind. The 4 means a 4-inch circle, the 5 is a 5, the 6 is a 6, and so on and so forth. The main thing to remember is to always cut the biggest circle first and work your way in. That's kind of the way I like to remember this. So if I want to cut an 11-inch circle, I'm going to put the line on this dial to the 11, and I'm going to tighten it. So now that's nice and tight. And then I'm going to center my paper on the 13 by 13 inch mat. So now if you don't have the 13 by 13 inch mat, you are going to want one, because what happens with this mat here is, and the 12 by 12 mat didn't have this, is you have all the markings around the side. And that's very important with the circle cutter, because you want to make sure that this now here, this 11-inch mark where this black line is, represents the center of the circle that you're going to be cutting. So if I want my 11-inch circle centered on this paper, I'm going to want to make sure that this line matches up with the 6-inch line on my cutting mat. So if you don't have this cutting mat, you're definitely going to want one. And that's also where this little line here that we just made comes into play, because you're also going to want to make sure that your circle cutter is centered horizontally and vertically on your page. So I'm going to line this marking up, the center of the mechanism, to the 6-inch mark here. So I have this line marked up with the 6-inch here, and then I pretty much have to eyeball it to make sure that we're lined up with the 6-inch here. And once we're lined up with both these 6 inches and this 6-inch, I can feel fairly confident that I'm going to be able to cut my 11-inch circle centered on the cutting mat. Now, the one thing you are going to want is, you can't see it right now, I'll lift it up and I'll show it later, is a piece of shelf liner, like the stuff that makes it non-slip. So like a non-slip liner. I think we use it mainly like for coffee cups and that kind of thing, so they don't slip. So that way your mat does not slip on your cutting surface. So now that we have our cutter placed on our paper exactly where we want it, we have our non-slip mat, what we need to do is we need to hold the cutter in place, and we do that by pressing this knob down. So remember I talked about that anchor? It keeps the mechanism onto the page. Now I like to stand up when I do this. If I sit down, sometimes I find it still does slip. So I have the anchor held, and then we're going to press in the little notch here, and then we press down. So this is an in and that's a down, and go around the paper. And so I have now cut my circle. I'm just going to pull that off as best I can. So you can see that I've cut the circle. Yay, I cut a circle. The next thing is if I want to cut, say, a 1-inch mat around here. So I have a nice, or a half an inch or whatever I end up wanting to do, so that I have a border. The important thing to remember here is not to move the anchor. Remember, because this anchor is centered on our circle, so we don't want to move that. What we want to do is loosen the dial, and then we're going to push this in. So if I push it into the 10, it's going to give a half an inch all the way around. So I will tighten it back up. So I haven't moved the anchor. The anchor has stayed in place. And so I'll press this in, and I'll just go around again. And now I have this symmetrical circle, which I probably can't get off because I'm trying not to move my anchor. Oh, there we go. So there's my symmetrical circle. So again, if I wanted another symmetrical circle, I can loosen the dial and move it in. So now this is at the 9. So each time I'm moving it in an inch, but it's only cutting half an inch because it's cutting that whole circle. So if I wanted an inch border, then I would have to move it down 2 inches. And that is, I'm going to remove that. So that is our circle cutters, how they cut your symmetrical circles. Let's just put that in. There we go. Isn't that fun? And for the drawing, let me see if I find a piece of paper for that. Now, I'm going to give a little disclaimer here. I've never actually done this part, but just for a quick visual so you can see, what I'll do is the same thing. So I'm adding in the fine tip. So it only works at the fine tip of your dual tip pen. You push it in, and let's see. So this works this way. So if I wanted, let's say I want that 11-inch again. Let's try a nice big one. We're going to center this again. Center this at the 6 and the 6 here. Then we're going to press, and note to self, don't put your pen in until you're ready to draw your circle. So there we go. So we've drawn a circle, and then if you want to move it down a little bit, you can do that. Oh, I didn't quite move that. So you can just kind of play with your circles. It's kind of fun. But yeah, so this end is the drawing end. So it's kind of like a little spirograph. So it's kind of like a 2-in-1 tool. So there you have it. That is your Creative Memories circle cut.